Her name was Sister Mary Agnes, a woman whose presence alone could quiet the heaviest hearts. Known for her compassion, her gentle hands, and her unwavering devotion, she was the soul of a small mountain parish. On a rainy afternoon in the spring of 2005, she left the convent to visit a sick child on the outskirts of town. A routine act of kindness, something she had done 100 times before. But that day she never came back. No one saw her again. No footprints, no broken branches, no signs of struggle. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole. For weeks, the community searched. Police combed the forest. Parishioners scoured every back road, every abandoned cabin, every crooked fence post. Flyers with her face fluttered from telephone poles, slowly weathering under wind and rain. But the search led nowhere. No answers. Only questions that grew heavier with each passing year. Some whispered that she'd gotten lost in the woods. Others suggested something darker, something that lived beyond what eyes could see or prayers could reach. As months turned into years, the story of Sister Mary Agnes became more than a mystery. It became a wound, a shadow that stretched across the town, lingering in empty pews and flickering candles left to burn through the night. Her name was spoken only in hushed tones, like a question no one was brave enough to ask anymore. How does someone so pure, so needed, simply vanish? And then, 18 years later, the silence shattered. A farmer clearing an overgrown field stumbled upon an old barn, half-rotted, swallowed by vines. Inside, tucked beneath a collapsed beam, he found something impossible. A cloak, threadbare, faded, but unmistakable. The very same cloak Sister Mary Agnes had been wearing the day she disappeared. Still intact, still folded, as if placed there by hands that never wanted it found. That discovery didn't bring closure. It opened a wound even deeper. Why was it there? How had it survived untouched for nearly 2 decades? And if her cloak was there, where was she? Or, more terrifying, who or what had left it behind? This is the story of a disappearance that refused to fade, and the terrible truth that may have been hiding in plain sight all along. Sister Mary Agnes wasn't just another figure in a habit. She was the heart of that small, close-knit community. People remembered her not for sermons, but for the way she appeared when no one else did, by hospital beds, on stormy nights delivering food, or kneeling beside grieving mothers long after others had gone home. Her disappearance wasn't just the loss of a person. It was as though a light had blinked out in a place already too familiar with darkness. In the days that followed her vanishing, something unspoken began to settle over the town. The search parties were relentless. At first, locals gathered with flashlights and dogs, their boots carving paths through soaked grass and mud. Yet, no matter how thorough, every trail led to the same dead end. The forest line near the Miller farm, where the dirt road forks, one path leading toward the child's house, the other fading into a dense, overgrown wood known by locals simply as the Quiet Hollow. Rumors began to spread, carried on whispers between pews and in back rooms of diners. Some said she had simply lost her way in the storm. Others, more shaken, spoke of older stories, tales told by grandmothers of the hollow, of the things that live between the trees when the mist rolls too thick and the air grows too still. But as weeks turned to months, people stopped speaking her name altogether. Silence became safer. Her convent never recovered. The nuns carried on in duty, but with hollow eyes, their prayers heavier, slower. Her room was kept exactly as she had left it, bed made, shoes lined beneath it, a rosary still dangling from the corner of the nightstand. No one dared touch it, as if moving anything would erase her entirely, or worse, invite whatever had taken her to notice them next. Years passed. The town grew quieter. People avoided the hollow, even if they never said so aloud. Her story became a kind of urban legend told in hushed voices, half reverence, half warning. Until that morning. Until that barn. Until the discovery that made the hairs on every neck stand straight and reminded everyone that the past isn't gone. It's just waiting for someone to look. The barn itself was a relic. A forgotten shell from a time when the land thrived with cattle and crops, long before families abandoned it. No one had set foot there for years. Some said it was cursed. Others simply said it was dangerous, half-rotted, ready to collapse. Yet when the farmer, Daniel Whitaker, pushed through the warped wooden doors, what he found wasn't decay. It was a secret waiting, perfectly preserved. There, beneath a fallen rafter and tucked under piles of dry, untouched hay, was her cloak. Faded gray, the edges frayed with time. But the clasp, a silver medallion shaped like a cross, still shined, polished, as if someone had wiped it clean just yesterday. And most chilling of all, it wasn't tossed aside. It was folded, neatly, carefully, with intention, as though someone had placed it there as an offering or a warning. Daniel froze. His first instinct was disbelief, his rational mind racing for explanations. Maybe it belonged to someone else. Maybe it was coincidence. But when he picked it up, a folded slip of paper fell from beneath the fabric. Water-stained, torn, but legible. 5 words scrawled in frantic, uneven handwriting. Don't follow where she went. Within hours, word spread like wildfire. The local sheriff arrived. The property was cordoned off, but those first on the scene whispered of something stranger. Inside the barn, they claimed the air was wrong. Heavy, still, as though even the insects refused to enter. The smell wasn't of dust or mold. It was sweet, metallic, familiar to anyone who's ever stood too close to something freshly wounded. The convent was notified. When the senior sister arrived and laid eyes on the cloak, her legs buckled, her face drained of every drop of color. Without a word, she crossed herself 3 times, then whispered, so soft no one could hear, "I told her not to go." The weight of those words hit harder than the discovery itself, because suddenly the town realized Sister Mary Agnes hadn't simply disappeared. She had gone somewhere she was warned never to enter, and whatever was waiting for her there hadn't let go. The sheriff's team combed the barn from corner to corner, searching for anything else, any clue that might finally explain what had happened 18 years ago. But the deeper they searched, the stranger it became. Beneath the cloak, buried under the cracked wooden floorboards, they found something else. Symbols, carved directly into the foundation. Circles within circles. Lines intersecting in patterns no one recognized. Symbols that fell wrong. Not decorative. Not accidental. Deliberate. An old deputy, now long retired but brought in for consultation due to his familiarity with the case, stared at the markings for a long time before shaking his head and whispering, "This wasn't made for anyone to find. This was made to hold something or someone in." His words carried through the barn like a cold wind, curling around everyone's skin, leaving behind that unshakable sensation, the kind you feel when you're standing somewhere you shouldn't be. Then came another discovery. Tucked behind a wall beam was a small, wooden box, sealed shut with wire twisted so tightly it had sunk into the wood. When they finally pried it open, inside was a rosary. Not just any rosary. Her rosary. The one Sister Mary Agnes had carried every day, its beads worn smooth from years of prayer. But it wasn't whole. The cross had been snapped clean in half, and tucked beneath it, a small lock of hair. Gray, curled, preserved. The forensic team confirmed it within hours. It was human hair. Female. The age of the strand aligned perfectly with someone's Sister Mary Agnes's age. But there was something else. Something even the technicians couldn't explain. The hair showed no signs of aging. 18 years had passed, but it hadn't decayed. As though time had stopped for it. Word spread faster than the sheriff could contain. People gathered outside the barn, whispering, praying, some outright sobbing. Others just stood, staring, like the answers were written in the cracks of the wood or hidden beneath the soil. Because deep down, everyone felt the same terrible pull. The understanding that whatever had happened to Sister Mary Agnes wasn't just an accident. It was part of something far older. And now, that something was awake again. As the investigation deepened, one simple but horrifying question took root. If the cloak had been left in the barn, was it ever truly lost? Had someone, or something, kept it hidden all these years? And if so, why reveal it now? Why now after so long? It was as though whatever had been keeping this secret had decided the time had come to let it breathe again. Leah Simmons, a local historian and former student of the convent, was called in to help interpret the symbols carved beneath the floorboards. Her face turned ashen the moment she saw them. "These aren't just symbols," she whispered, tracing one with trembling fingers. These are containment marks, warding signs mixed with something else. Something older. Something predating the church. This barn wasn't just hiding something. It was holding something in place. Her words sent a chill down the spine of everyone in the room. But as she flipped through her worn, leather-bound reference books, she stumbled upon a terrifying detail. The same pattern of markings had appeared in records from 1912, when 3 children vanished from the same region under mysterious circumstances. Their bodies were never found. But a barn, this barn, was mentioned in a single police note. Locals refused to enter. They say it holds what was left behind. And then, something even more chilling. The sheriff's deputy found, behind a loose panel in the barn's rafters, a bundle of letters. Faded, water-stained but legible. The handwriting matched Sister Mary Agnes's own. Dates on the letters ranged from the week before she vanished to 6 weeks after. Letters written long after the search was called off. Long after everyone believed she was gone. The final letter was dated exactly 43 days after she disappeared. It contained only one line. A line that would haunt every person who read it for the rest of their lives. They told me if someone finds this, it means they've chosen again. The discovery of the letters shattered everything the town thought it understood. Sister Mary Agnes hadn't simply vanished into thin air. She had been alive. For days, weeks, after the night, everyone believed she was lost. But the tone of her letters shifted, starting with desperation, then slipping into something darker. Something resigned, as though she had realized escape was never the goal. It was survival. And survival here had its own rules. One line from her second letter echoed in everyone's mind. It doesn't speak. It doesn't move. But waits, and it watches. The words were simple, but the weight behind them suffocated anyone brave enough to read them out loud. Her descriptions hinted at a presence. Not human, not animal. Something that existed in the stillness. Something that thrived in the absence of sound, in the cracks between breaths. Leah, the historian, dug deeper into town archives, desperate to connect the markings in the barn with any past records. What she uncovered chilled her to the bone. A newspaper clipping from 1879 spoke of the Hollow Sisterhood, a group of women who lived on the outskirts, known for practicing protective rites over sacred grounds. One line stood out in jagged ink. A vow made to keep what sleeps beneath the veil. The price is always a walker. A walker. The one who steps forward when others turn away. The one who carries the weight. The one who disappears. Samuel, a deputy who had initially treated the case as nothing more than reopening an old tragedy, now stared at the evidence with hollow eyes. "This isn't a crime scene," he muttered. "This is a transaction. And I think someone just restarted it." His voice trembled, not with fear alone, but with the realization that they were no longer investigating the past. They were standing inside the first chapter of something beginning again. And then came the sound. From the barn's rafters. A hollow knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. Followed by silence. Everyone inside froze. Because it wasn't the sound itself that was terrifying. It was the realization that it hadn't echoed. It hadn't bounced off wood or stone. It sounded swallowed, as though the air itself had caught it, held it, consumed it. As night fell, the barn was sealed off, but no one felt safe. Not in their homes, not in their churches, not anywhere within the town. Because deep down, an undeniable truth had begun to settle. The thing that had taken Sister Mary Agnes had never left. It had only been waiting, watching. And now, the clock had reset. Leah gathered every historical map, every scrap of folklore she could find. Her fingers trembled as she traced a line from the barn to the quiet hollow, then to the convent, then back again. A perfect circle, a closed loop, a route walked over and over through generations. A pilgrimage, not one of devotion, not one of faith, but one of surrender, of offering. Samuel pieced together a horrifying pattern. Every 20 to 25 years, someone disappeared near the hollow. Always someone alone. Always someone on a mission of mercy, bringing food, delivering medicine, visiting the sick, people the town needed most. And every time, there was a moment beforehand when something small, seemingly innocent, had appeared, a broken rosary, a torn page from a Bible, or, this time, a folded cloak in a forgotten barn. Then, from the convent itself, a new clue surfaced. Sister Agnes's diary, hidden behind a loose brick in her old room, untouched for nearly 2 decades. The entries grew increasingly fragmented in the days before she vanished. One page stood out, smeared, written in frantic, shaking hands. They asked me to visit the child, but there was no child. There was never a child. The trap hadn't been in the woods. The trap had been the request, the mission, the purpose, the cloak of charity used to lure the walker forward, once again. And just as they finished reading those words, the power in the convent flickered. Lights dimmed. The air thickened. From the woods, a low, pulsing hum began to rise. A sound not carried by wind, but by the ground itself. A vibration, a signal. Something was stirring. Something that had been patient for far too long, and now was waking. The hum beneath the ground wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. A signal that something massive, something older than language itself, had begun to stir. People across town reported the same thing that night. Glasses rattling on shelves, photos shifting on walls, a deep ache in their chest, as if their hearts beat out of sync with the world around them. Some described the sensation as pressure, others as being watched by something that didn't blink. Leah stood in her office, poring over the diary, the letters, the symbols. But no combination of logic, faith, or history made sense of what they were facing. One sentence from the bishop's archives haunted her. The hollow does not take. It accepts what is offered. And suddenly, she realized with horrific clarity, Sister Mary Agnes hadn't been taken. She had been sent, delivered. By whom? By what? And why? At the sheriff's office, Samuel pinned all the maps and records on the wall, drawing lines, circling dates, making connections. His eyes burned from hours without sleep, but what chilled him wasn't the history. It was the pattern, because the timeline wasn't just random disappearances. It was calculated, cyclical. Every 18 to 20 years, the offering was made. And the last one was Sister Mary Agnes. 18 years ago, meaning now it was due. The clock had hit 0. Then came the knock. Not at the door, not at the window, but from inside the walls. A soft, hollow rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Silence. Then again. 1, 2, 3. As though the house itself was breathing, or worse, responding. Samuel spun, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Only the hum beneath his feet, louder now, more insistent, and with it, the smell. Faint, sweet, metallic. The same one Daniel Whitaker had described in the barn. It filled the room slowly, like invisible smoke, curling through air vents, slipping beneath doorways. The kind of smell that doesn't come from decay, but from something becoming. The town awoke the next morning to something they couldn't explain. The sky had turned. Not dark, not gray, but bruised. A shade between purple and black, heavy and swollen, as though the clouds themselves were holding something back. The wind didn't blow. The trees didn't sway. The birds didn't sing. Everything was perfectly, horrifically still. And then came the footprints. At first, Daniel was the only one to see them, leading from the edge of the hollow straight into town. But as more people ventured out, the pattern became clear. Hundreds of footprints. Small, large, barefoot, some human, some not, some wrong, as if the foot that made them had too many toes, or been in directions it shouldn't. Leah followed them with Samuel, tracing the prints down the main street, past the bakery, the old chapel, until they stopped. Abruptly, right in front of the convent. No trails leading away. No signs of entry. Just an end. A perfect dead stop, like something had arrived, but never left. When they entered the convent, the air was colder than outside. Heavier. The scent from the barn was here, too. Thick, suffocating. And there, in the center of Sister Mary Agnes's old room, was something new. A pile of dirt. Perfectly circular. Fresh. Damp. As though it had just been scooped from a grave. Sitting atop it, a single shoe. Small. Leather. The kind worn by a child. A child who, by every account, had never existed. Leah's knees buckled. Samuel gripped the doorframe, unable to breathe, because as they stared at the impossible scene before them, the memory of the letters surfaced again, burning into their minds. There was no child. There was never a child. The realization was inescapable. The child wasn't the bait. The child was the invitation. And now, The door had been opened again. As the minutes stretched into an unbearable silence, Leah's trembling hands hovered over the small shoe. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't worn. It was clean, perfect, as though someone, or something, had placed it there mere moments before they arrived. Samuel scanned the room, flashlight cutting through the thick, suffocating air, but it didn't help. Shadows bent the wrong way. Corners seemed deeper than geometry should allow, like the walls stretched into somewhere else, somewhere beneath. Then the noise started, soft at first, a whisper, not from the air, but from the floorboards themselves. Words spoken not in breath, but in vibration. One walks, one watches, one waits, over and over. The phrase looped, growing louder, not in sound, but inside their bones, inside their heads. A voice that wasn't outside, but within. Samuel backed toward the doorway, instinct roaring to run. But Leah remained frozen, her eyes locked on the dirt mound. Something shifted beneath it, moved, just slightly. The dirt pulsed, breathing, and then it cracked, a split down the center. Not like a collapse, but like something pushing up from below, trying to surface, trying to rise. She grabbed Samuel's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." But as they turned, something blocked the hallway. A figure, small, childlike, perfectly still, its head tilted unnaturally to the side, hair hanging in tangled clumps, a smile too wide drawn across a face that was both too human and not human enough. Glassy eyes reflected no light. Empty, watching, and without moving its lips, the voice echoed again, clearer, sharper, closer. One walks, one watches, one waits, one walks, one watches, one waits. Leah's heartbeat drowned out everything. The pounding in her chest felt like it would crack her ribs. Samuel stepped in front of her, hand trembling over the grip of his holstered gun. But deep down, they both knew bullets weren't going to change whatever this was. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. It just was. A presence that didn't belong here. Or maybe had always belonged here. Then, without warning, the lights in the convent flared, blazing white for a split second, and then shattered into complete darkness. Glass exploded. The walls trembled. From somewhere deep below, a sound rose, low, guttural, like the grinding of stone mixed with a voice not made for human ears. A voice speaking not to them, but through them. Samuel dragged Leah by the wrist, sprinting down the hallway toward the exit. Behind them, the footsteps followed. Not fast, not loud, just steady, like the ticking of a clock, a rhythm that had started long before they were born, and would continue long after they were gone. One walks, one watches, one waits. Bursting through the front doors, they gasped for air, only to realize the outside was no better. The sky had darkened further. The clouds now churned like liquid, folding in on themselves in slow, unnatural spirals. The footprints from earlier? Gone. Erased. But in their place, something worse. Circles. Dozens of them. Perfectly etched into the dirt. Symbols. Each one matching the carvings found beneath the barn. And then, at the far end of the road, the bells rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. But not from the church. Not from the convent. The sound drifted from the hollow. And it wasn't a call to prayer. It was a summons. The sound of the bells wasn't just a noise. It was a vibration, deep and physical, crawling under the skin, settling inside the chest like something alive. Each toll echoed longer than the last, overlapping into a continuous hum that made the air feel heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. Samuel gripped Leah's arm tightly, his voice cracking as he whispered, "It's calling. Whatever it is, it knows." The path toward the hollow had changed. It was no longer just a dirt trail vanishing into the trees. It had widened. The forest on either side seemed to bow away from it, branches pulled back unnaturally, creating a corridor lined with roots that twisted like hands reaching out, beckoning. What terrified them most was the fact that the ground wasn't muddy, despite the looming storm. It was dry, clean, as if it hadn't been walked in centuries, or as if it had just been prepared. Leah glanced back toward the town. But it was wrong, distant, faded, like looking through glass warped by heat. The buildings seemed smaller, the sky darker. Sound didn't carry the way it should. Even the wind had stopped. The world behind them was pulling away. As if the moment they stepped toward the trail, the town itself had begun letting go of them. Then movement. At the tree line. Not a person. Not an animal. A silhouette. Tall. Thin. Unmoving. Watching. Its presence was wrong. Not in the way a predator watches prey, but in the way something studies a tool. Evaluating. Waiting. Judging whether what stood before was ready to serve or to be consumed. The bells tolled again. This time, the sound fractured. Not a clean note, but a scream layered beneath it, something buried in the chime. A voice. Distant. Echoing. A woman's voice. Faint, but unmistakable. Don't follow where I went. Sister Mary Agnes. Leah froze, her entire body locking as the voice echoed through her spine. Her eyes widened, scanning the woods, the trail, the impossible horizon in front of them. But no figure emerged. No face. Only that voice, fading, distant, as though torn between worlds, trapped somewhere just beyond reach. Samuel's face drained of all color. He knew. They both knew. This wasn't a warning meant to stop them. This was a warning meant to prepare them. The dirt beneath their feet trembled. Not like an earthquake. Like breath. Rising. Falling. A heartbeat. As if the ground itself wasn't solid, but skin stretched thin over something vast. Something alive. And as they looked closer, they saw it. The faintest pulsing glow beneath the soil. Lines. Veins. A web running beneath the trail, beneath the barn, beneath the entire town. Samuel raised his flashlight, the beam cutting through the encroaching fog. Ahead, the trail twisted into a narrow choke point framed by two trees whose trunks were fused together at the top, forming an arch carved into the bark with the same symbols from the barn. Except these weren't aged or weathered. They were fresh, as though someone had carved them last night, or last hour. Then a sound neither of them would ever forget. A giggle. Small, childlike, but hollow, broken. The kind of sound that starts playful, but ends wrong. Deeply, horribly wrong. Leah turned slowly. At the base of one tree stood a figure. Small, pale, its back to them, head tilted slightly to one side. Motionless. The same child-shaped figure they had seen inside the convent. But now, it wasn't watching from behind. It was waiting ahead. Etched into the dirt before its feet, scrawled like it had been clawed by hand, was a message, barely legible through the cracks forming in the earth. The first to walk never left. The moment Leah read those words scratched into the dirt, the first to walk never left, her throat tightened. Her legs felt heavy, as if the ground itself was trying to root her in place. Samuel stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself between Leah and the figure ahead. But the childlike silhouette didn't move. It didn't need to. Its presence was enough to warp the air around them. Thicker, colder, humming with a frequency just below hearing. Suddenly, the figure twitched, head jerking slightly, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. It didn't turn, didn't speak, but from somewhere, not from its lips, but from everywhere at once, a voice whispered, "She walked for you. She waits for you. Now you walk for her." It wasn't a threat. It was a command dressed as a truth. A statement of something inevitable. Leah staggered backward, her mind spinning. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. The walk of Sister Mary Agnes wasn't a tragedy. It was a role, a position in a cycle that had never truly broken. A role that demanded to be filled again and again. The staff may change. The face may change. But the trail remained. Eternal. The earth trembled again, more violently this time. Cracks split open along the trail edges, and from them, hands. Pale, thin, fingers stretched long beyond what should be possible, clawing at the dirt. Not to pull themselves out, but to hold the cracks open. To widen them. To prepare the way. Then, as if on cue, the bells rang once more. Except this time, they didn't come from a hollow. They came from beneath. Beneath the dirt. Beneath their feet, the sound of bells tolling from under the earth, reverberating like a heartbeat. The message was deafening in its silence. The trail wasn't ahead anymore, it was below. Samuel's flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then died completely. The world snapped into a twilight darker than natural night, where the only source of light was the pulsing red glow rising from the fractures in the ground. It wasn't fire. It wasn't lava. It was something more impossible, a light that looked like it bled, like it wanted to be seen but hated to be looked at. From the widening cracks, whispers rose. Not one voice. Hundreds. Layered. Overlapping. Some sounded like prayers. Others like sobs. Others were laughter. But beneath all of them, one constant line repeated, winding through the chaos like a thread sewn through flesh. One walks. One watches. One waits. It was no longer a chant. It was a law. The child-shaped figure stepped forward, not walking, but gliding, as though the earth shifted to move it. Its head tilted backward unnaturally, exposing a neck that seemed stretched too far, skin thinning until veins pulsed beneath it like black roots. And then it pointed. A single, trembling finger aimed directly at the center of the trail, where the largest fracture had opened, where the light pulsed brightest. Samuel gripped Leah's hand, whispering through gritted teeth. We turned back. Now, we shouldn't be here. But as they spun around, their breath caught. The trail behind them, the way they came, was gone, replaced by a wall of trees twisted together, bark fused, roots tangled like sinew and muscle. The way back wasn't closed. It had been erased, as though it had never existed in the first place. Then, from the deepest part of the open fracture, something emerged. Slow, rising, a shape, not solid, not shadow, something in between. A figure tall enough that it didn't climb out of the chasm. It unfolded from it. Limbs that split and stitched themselves into new forms. Faces that blinked open on its chest. Its arms, only to shut again. And through a mouth that wasn't a mouth, it whispered the words neither of them would ever forget. She didn't finish the walk. But you will. Leah couldn't move. Her body refused. Her mind screamed to run, to turn, to fight. But every muscle was locked as though the very air had become concrete. Samuel's grip on her hand trembled violently, his breath shallow and ragged. Neither of them could look directly at the thing rising from the chasm. Its form shifted constantly, limbs folding into torsos, faces blinking open across its body, mouths appearing where none should be, speaking in whispers that didn't come from sound, but from inside their bones. The figure's presence bent reality around it. Trees warped, their trunks cracking as they leaned unnaturally toward the fracture. The sky above churned, clouds spinning into spirals so deep they seemed to drill into the heavens themselves. And the ground wasn't solid anymore. It pulsed. It breathed. Beneath their feet, something massive turned waiting. Then came the sound again. That same laugh. Childlike. Hollow. Twisting through the fog. The small figure, the child-shaped thing, stepped closer to the edge of the chasm. Its body flickered between solid and shadow, as though reality itself couldn't decide whether it truly existed. With a hand too small for its proportions, it gestured toward the fracture, toward the light, toward the abyss. A whisper cut through the static of their minds. The trail below is the oldest, and as those words sank into their consciousness, both Leah and Samuel understood the most horrifying truth yet. The trail wasn't new. It wasn't something built to punish Sister Mary Agnes, or them. It had always been there. Beneath the ground, beneath the barn, beneath the convent, beneath the town itself. The surface trail was only ever a reflection, a shadow of what lay beneath. Samuel's breath hitched. Leah, look. He pointed, his hand shaking violently. Across the other side of the fracture, barely visible through the shifting fog and bleeding light, was a figure, kneeling, head bowed, hands folded in prayer, wearing a faded gray habit. Her, Sister Mary Agnes, or what remained of her. Leah staggered forward a step, unable to fully process whether what she saw was real or some horrific echo of what once was. The figure didn't move, didn't react. She simply knelt there, as though frozen in time. But the longer Leah stared, the more she noticed something worse. Her hands weren't folded in prayer. They were bound with what looked like roots or veins, pulsing gently as though they were part of something still alive. And then, the figure slowly, mechanically, raised her head. Her face, once familiar, kind, warm, was hollow. Eyes black, empty, vast. Skin stretched too thin over a skeletal frame. mouth slightly open as though caught mid-whisper. But no sound came from her. Instead, the ground spoke for her. The dirt vibrated, the stones cracked, and a voice, low, layered, impossibly deep, rumbled. One walks, one watches, one waits, one replaces. Samuel gripped Leah's shoulder, pulling her back. We can't do this. We're not supposed to see this. His voice fractured somewhere between a sob and a scream. But the trail, the fracture, it disagreed. The earth trembled. The roots surged forward, creeping toward their feet like fingers dragging across skin. Not fast, not desperate, patient, certain, as though it knew. All it had to do was wait. Then, the bells rang again. But this time, they didn't toll. They screamed, a sound that didn't come from bronze or steel, but from the bones of the earth itself. A shriek so loud it tore the air apart, leaving behind pockets of silence, so deep they felt like voids, places where sound, light, and even thought refused to exist. And through that ruptured silence, Sister Mary Agnes finally spoke. Her lips didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. But her voice bled into the air, fragmented, distorted, layered with something else. Something older. Something beneath. You found me, because it wanted you to. The trail never ends. It only waits for the next one. The words hit like a physical blow. Leah stumbled back, her vision tunneling, her mind unraveling as she tried to process what Sister Mary Agnes, or whatever remained of her, had just confessed. The trail never ends. It only waits. This wasn't a rescue. It wasn't closure. It was an invitation, a passing of something ancient, a baton soaked not in tradition, but in sacrifice. Beneath their feet, the cracks widened. More hands emerged. Thin, pale, fingers with joints bending backward. Not crawling out, not escaping, just holding, keeping the wound open. The ground wasn't breaking. It was opening. A mouth. A gate. The boundary between the seen and the unseen had become paper-thin, held together by threads that trembled with every pulse of the bells. Samuel's breath fractured, his eyes wild. We were never meant to solve this, Leah. We were meant to be the next piece. The next chapter. His voice shook, not from fear alone, but from the weight of inevitability. Because the longer they stood on that fractured earth, the more they felt it. The pull. A gravitational hunger not of physics, but of intention. Then the light shifted. The red glow from the chasm below dimmed, not fading, but focusing, concentrating into lines. Paths, trails, stretching deep into the abyss. And along those paths, shapes moved. Figures. Dozens. Hundreds. Some walked upright. Some crawled. Some floated. Their bodies stitched together wrong. Limbs too long. Faces in places faces shouldn't be. And all of them, walking. Forward. Always forward. And then, silhouetted against the deepest part of the fracture, another figure rose. Taller. Broader. Cloaked in shadow, and something wet that glistened as it moved. Its face wasn't a face. Just a hole. A void where a mouth should be. And from that void, a sound emerged. Not words, but the sound of a breath being drawn in. A deep, infinite inhale. As if the thing was preparing to speak. When the voice came, it wasn't a sound. It was pressure. Weight. A vibration that bypassed ears entirely and burrowed straight into the bones. Straight into the mind. A voice that wasn't heard, but felt. It filled every hollow space in Leah's chest. Every corner of Samuel's mind. Every crack in the earth itself. One walks. One watches. One waits. One replaces. The trail remains. The child-shaped figure reappeared, stepping forward from the fog that now poured like smoke from the fractures in the earth. Its head tilted. Its glassy eyes stared, empty and eternal. Then it pointed, slowly, towards Samuel, and then toward Leah. One finger for each. A decision had been made. Or maybe it always had been. Roots exploded from the ground. Thick, wet, veined. They wrapped around Samuel's legs, dragging him forward. His scream wasn't one of pain. It was one of realization. Of knowing exactly what this was. What this always had been. A procession. A ritual. A walk designed not to reach somewhere, but to become something. To become part of the trail itself. Leah fought. kicking, scratching. Her hands clawed at the dirt as the roots latched around her wrists, her ankles, her waist. But the earth didn't care. The trail didn't care. The hum beneath the surface intensified. The symbols pulsed, now burning into her skin with a heat that wasn't fire, but memory, like the echo of everyone who had ever walked before her now lived inside the veins of this place. As her vision blurred, as the roots dragged her to the edge of the chasm, one final whisper filled the air, so quiet it was almost a thought. The first never left. The last never will. The trail only ever waits for the next step. And then, together, Leah and Samuel fell forward. Into the fracture. Into the trail beneath the world. The fall wasn't like falling through air. It wasn't gravity pulling them down. It was like being dragged through layers of fabric, of skin, of reality itself folding and unfolding around them. Leah couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Her body twisted in directions that shouldn't exist. Her senses shattered into fragments. Sight, sound, touch, all disconnected. Up and down stopped meaning anything. There was only forward, only the trail. When they hit the ground, it wasn't solid. It was soft, breathing. The earth below them pulsed like muscle, warm and slick beneath their hands. A dark, red light stretched into a tunnel. No walls, no ceiling, just shifting forms that bent and convulsed like something alive. And along that tunnel, footprints. Deep, fresh, hundreds of them, walking in the same direction. Always forward, always deeper. The air vibrated with sound, but it wasn't sound. It was remembrance. Voices layered on top of one another. Whispers of the ones who walked before. Names spoken. Prayers repeated. Cries for help that never reached the surface. And beneath it all, one constant hum. Like a song written in a language too old for words. A language made of intent. Of hunger. Leah staggered to her feet, her chest heaving, and grabbed Samuel's hand. His face was pale, eyes wide with horror, but worse than the fear was the understanding written across his face. "This is the real trail," he whispered, his voice brittle. "The one they never told anyone about. The one that doesn't lead out, it only leads in." Ahead, the tunnel opened wider. The walls, if they could be called that, shifted, revealing shapes fused into the flesh of the path. Bodies, faces, hands stretched from the walls like statues made of bone and sinew, their mouths open in silent screams. Some were whole, some half-formed, some still twitched. The trail didn't just consume the walkers. It kept them. It wore them. As they pushed forward, the light began to change. From red to black. A black so dense it wasn't the absence of light. It was the presence of something else. A weight, a density that swallowed sight, sound, thought. The only thing left was the feeling of the path beneath their feet. The trail guiding them, demanding them. Then voices. Louder now, clearer. Not whispers anymore, but chants. A choir of voices layered in perfect dissonance. Some male, some female, something else. Walk, 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 walk. The words weren't a command. They were an inevitability. A statement of reality. Of purpose. Walkers didn't choose to walk. Walkers existed because the trail required them. Shapes emerged from the shadows ahead. Tall, thin, cloaked in fabric that shimmered like oil under invisible light. No faces. Only veils stitched where faces should be. Each figure stood on either side of the path, hands extended, palms facing upward, as though offering or waiting to receive. The guardians of the trail, or perhaps the collectors of it. Samuel stopped. His breath trembled. "We can't go back," he whispered. "There's no back. Only forward." And in that sentence was the worst realization of all. The trail was never about a destination. It was about the walk itself. About feeding the path with footsteps, with presence, with flesh. And as they stepped closer to the line of veiled figures, something rose in the distance. A structure, a shape, a gate. Not a door, but an arch made of bones, roots, and something with that still pulse like veins. Carved in the arch were words, etched deep, ragged, furious. "What walks never leaves." As they stood before the arch, a pressure pushed against their chests. Not wind, not force, but something deeper. A resistance woven into the fabric of the air itself, like the trail itself was measuring them, deciding whether to accept or reject. But rejection, they both realized, wasn't freedom. It was simply another kind of trap. Leah's eyes locked onto the words above the arch. What walks, never leaves. They weren't just a warning. They were a promise. A rule. A law older than memory. Older than language. Samuel's hand trembled as he reached out, fingers grazing the bone and root structure. It was warm, wet, beating, alive. The arch wasn't a gate to somewhere else. It was the mouth of something. Something vast. Something endless. Then, the figures moved. In unison. Perfect. Terrifying. Their veiled heads turned toward Leah and Samuel, arms raising higher, palms facing out as though pushing. No, inviting. From beneath their robes, something dripped. Thick. Black. Viscous. It splattered on the ground, hissing against the pulsing earth, releasing clouds of smoke that didn't rise, but sank, sinking into the trail, feeding it. The hum returned, louder now, a roar inside the mind rather than the ears. And with it, the words, clearer than ever. Not whispered, not sung, spoken, with weight, with certainty. One walks, one watches, one waits, one replaces. It wasn't a choice. It never was. Leah squeezed Samuel's hand. Her voice was little more than breath. If we go through, we're not coming back. Samuel didn't answer. He didn't need to, because they both understood. Stepping through that arch didn't mean finding answers. It meant becoming part of them, becoming part of the trail, becoming the very thing they had spent their lives unknowingly walking upon. As their feet crossed beneath the arch, reality itself fractured. The air split like glass, and for a moment, they saw everything, not with eyes, but with something deeper, memories that weren't theirs. Faces, places, walkers, thousands of them, millions, stretching back through time, through generations, through civilizations that didn't even have names anymore. All of them here, all of them walking. The trail opened wider beyond the gate, no longer confined to a tunnel or chasm. It was a landscape, an impossible horizon where the ground writhed and pulsed like muscle beneath skin. Towers of bone stretched toward a sky that didn't exist, stitched together by roots that pulsed with blood. And across it all figures, walking, always walking, some dragging broken limbs, some faceless, some headless, but all moving forward. And in the distance, at the farthest edge of the horizon, stood something massive, something so large it seemed to bend space around it. A silhouette shaped like a figure, but with no defined edges. Its outline shimmered, flickering between forms. A woman, a child, a beast, a void. A shape that was all of them, and none of them. A god, or a grave, or both. Samuel gripped Leah's shoulder, forcing his voice through the tremor in his throat. This is it. This is what took her. What takes all of them? His eyes were wide with terror, but laced with something else now. Not just fear, resignation, the understanding that once seen, this place never truly lets go. Not of the body, not of the mind. Then, directly in front of them, the ground split open one final time, and from that opening rose the familiar shape of Sister Mary Agnes. Her face hollow, her eyes bottomless, her mouth slowly opened, not in speech, but in a grin, wide, splitting her face in half. And through that smile, the same voice echoed once more. The trail remains. And now, so do you. The smile stretched further, far beyond what human skin should allow, splitting Sister Mary Agnes's face until it wasn't a face anymore. Just a jagged wound shaped like a grin, leaking something black and thick that dripped onto the trail below. But her eyes were worse. Bottomless. Hollow. Not empty, but endless. As though staring into them meant staring into a depth from which the mind could never return. Samuel staggered backward, dragging Leah with him, but the trail beneath their feet pulsed, locking them in place. With every beat, the earth beneath them tightened, like a throat contracting, pulling them deeper. The ground wasn't just alive, it was aware, watching, reacting, and it wanted them to know it. Then, the shapes from the horizon began moving. Dozens, no, hundreds. Figures stitched from flesh and root, walking with joints that bent wrong, with heads that floated inches above their necks. with torsos split open to reveal empty cages where hearts should be. But none of them looked at Leah or Samuel. None of them even noticed them. They were too busy walking. Walking forward. Always forward. Above, the sky cracked. Not with lightning, but with fractures of lightless void. Cracks that peeled reality open, revealing something behind it. Something bigger. Something older. Hands, impossibly large, pressed against the edges of the fractures. Fingers stretching through, as if something colossal tried to reach through the skin of the world. Trying to pull it open, just a little more. Then the bells tolled again, louder than they ever had. But this time, they didn't sound like bells. They sounded like bones. Snapping, grinding, clashing together in perfect rhythm. A signal, a countdown, or maybe an announcement. Because whatever was waiting beyond those cracks was almost here. The veiled figures that lined the trail reappeared, closer now. Their robes dragged through the blood-wet soil, stitched with threads of hair, sinew, and something that gleamed wet under the impossible light. They formed a circle around Leah and Samuel, heads bowed, arms extended, palms up, waiting, demanding. From between them, a new figure stepped forward. Not tall, not monstrous. Human, perfectly human. A woman, face-aged but kind. Familiar, terrifyingly familiar. Leah's breath caught as her brain tried to reject what her eyes confirmed. It was the mother of the child Sister Mary Agnes had gone to visit 18 years ago. A child that had never existed. A mission that had never been real. The woman's face was calm, serene. Her eyes black wells that reflected no light. Her voice came as a whisper layered with 1,000 echoes. Every walker begins with a request. A knock. A need. That's how the trail opens. That's how it always begins. And then, her smile widened. Not cruel. Not malicious. Just inevitable. And you heard the knock. The veiled figures moved in unison, their heads snapping upward, revealing faces, or the lack of them. Hollow voids. Some filled with teeth. Some with eyes. Others just open mouths, inhaling but never exhaling. From within those voids came the chant again, thunderous now, shaking the ground. One walks, one watches, one waits, one replaces, one remains. And as the words echoed, the massive hands pressing through the fractures above began tearing the sky apart. As the sky tore open, the hands gripped the edges of reality, pulling it wider. The sound was unbearable, like the earth itself was screaming. Not just air splitting, but the very fabric of existence unraveling. Through the widening gap, something pressed closer. A form, shapeless yet overwhelming. Not a creature, not a god. Something older than either concept. A presence made of intent, of hunger, of cycles repeated since before memory. Leah squeezed Samuel's hand as the pressure became suffocating. Neither could breathe. Neither could think. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The world behind them, the town, the convent, the barn, was gone. Erased. Consumed by the trail. Ahead, only the expanding void. And the trail that now didn't lead through a forest, but through the torn skin of reality itself. Then, the veiled figures stepped aside in perfect unison, parting the circle like the opening of a ceremonial gate. The woman, the mother of the non-existent child, extended her hand toward Leah, not offering comfort, offering the choice. The trail must have a walker. Her voice was final, not threatening, not pleading, just inevitable. The one who walks allows the others to remain. For now, Samuel's breathing fractured, his knees buckled. Leah, his voice cracked, desperate. But as he said it, both of them heard the whisper beneath the noise. A whisper from the figure still kneeling at the center, the hollow-eyed shape of Sister Mary Agnes. Her mouth barely moved, but the words stabbed like knives. I waited because no one replaced me. In that moment, Leah understood. It had never been about rescue, never about escape. It was about continuity, preservation, the cycle. The trail was a wound in the world that could never close, but could be managed. But only if someone walked. Leah stepped forward. The earth beneath her feet pulsed, breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The woman smiled, almost tenderly, as she placed something cold, metallic, and impossibly heavy into Leah's palm. The rosary. Sister Mary Agnes's rosary. Except now, the cross was whole again, reformed, reforged, as though accepting that the next had come. The moment Leah's fingers closed around it, the ground shifted. The hands in the sky paused. The widening fractures held. The pressure that threatened to collapse existence itself stilled. Not stopped, not ended, just paused, as if the very fabric of the trail acknowledged the transaction, the offering, the replacement. The veiled figures turned their heads downward in unison, their mouths releasing a final breath, an exhale that echoed like wind through a cavern too deep to measure. The chant slowed, softened, but never ended. One walks, one watches, one waits, one replaces, one remains. Leah turned to Samuel, her eyes glassy, empty, but peaceful. Her lips trembled, forcing out one final, fractured sentence. You gotta go home. And with those words, the path behind Samuel, gone for so long, opened. The forest reappeared. The fog cleared. The barn stood whole again. The town shimmered back into existence, as though it had never been swallowed. But Samuel understood immediately. The trail never gives anything for free. Samuel stumbled backward as the trail behind him solidified. Trees reformed. The sky patched itself back together. The oppressive hum softened, retreating like a predator satisfied, for now. But his legs barely worked. His breaths came ragged, shallow. He wasn't sure if he was truly breathing, or if the trail simply allowed him to believe he was. He turned back one last time. The arch was still there, but the world beyond had shifted. No longer a landscape of bone and muscle. No longer a sky torn open by hands too large to be named. Now, it was simply a path. A narrow trail winding into a dense fog. And, standing at its entrance, Leah, silent, still, watching. Her face wasn't hollow like Sister Mary Agnes's. Not yet. But her eyes were already changing. The depth of them wasn't natural. They no longer reflected light. They absorbed it, consuming everything. A mirror to something infinite. Something beneath. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. She didn't need them. Her presence alone was the message. The trail remains. And now so do I. The veiled figures faded, their forms unraveling into threads of shadow that drifted back into the earth. The crack sealed. The hand in the sky withdrew. The bells silenced. But the silence wasn't relief. It was a holding pattern. A breath between beats. The kind of silence that doesn't mark the end, only the pause before the next beginning. As Samuel staggered back toward the town, everything looked normal. Perfectly normal. The sun shined weakly through gray clouds. Birds chirped. Cars passed on the distant highway. But the weight in his chest didn't lift. Because once you've seen the trail, once you've walked its skin, the world never feels real again. And somewhere, deep beneath the pavement, beneath the roots, beneath the foundations of every building, he felt it, breathing. The town welcomed him back like nothing had ever happened. Smiles, small talk, familiar faces. But no one remembered the search. No one remembered the barn. No one spoke of Sister Mary Agnes. It was as if her existence had been wiped clean from memory. Erased. Except for Samuel. Only him. Because that's how the trail worked. It left just enough behind to whisper. Samuel sat on the edge of his bed that night, staring at the floor. His hands trembled, fingers twitching without control. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Leah, standing at the entrance of the trail. Watching, waiting, and worse, part of him heard her, felt her, a pressure in the back of his skull, a heartbeat that wasn't his own, a whisper beneath every noise in the room. One walks, one watches, one waits. Then he noticed something, on his nightstand, something that hadn't been there before. Small, simple, a folded piece of fabric, gray, faded, perfectly folded. The cloak, Sister Mary Agnes's cloak, or now, Leah's, sitting silently, waiting. Samuel's breath caught, his chest seized, because on top of the cloak was a note, handwritten, ink smudged, just 5 words, the same words that had haunted every page of Sister Mary Agnes's last letter, the same warning that had echoed from the barn, from the trail, from the mouths of the hollow-eyed. Don't follow where I went. But below it, something new, a line scrawled in fresh ink, a line that wasn't a warning, but a decision, a message not left for him, but from him. Or do. The trail waits. The note trembled in Samuel's hands. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out every other sound. The world felt thinner now, more fragile. Like one wrong movement would tear it open again. His eyes flicked back to the cloak, perfectly folded, radiating a presence that didn't belong here. It wasn't just an object. It was a message, a tether, a key, and then the knock. Soft, gentle, but deliberate. 3 taps against his front door. Not frantic, not urgent, just waiting. His breath hitched. Every instinct screamed to stay still, to pretend he hadn't heard. But a deeper part of him, the part forever marked by the trail, knew what that knock was. It was never just someone at the door. It was the beginning, the first step. Slowly he stood. His feet felt heavier than they should, as though the floorboards themselves resisted every movement. Each step toward the door echoed louder than it should in the silence of the house. A silence that was no longer absence of sound, but the presence of watching. His hand hovered over the doorknob. Behind it, no voices, no shadows under the crack of the door. Just presence. A presence that didn't belong to anyone waiting on the porch, but to something standing beneath. Something listening, smiling, waiting for him to turn the handle. As his fingers closed around the cold metal, his mind repeated the line from the note. Over and over. Or do. The trail waits. Because the truth wasn't about what happened 18 years ago, or even today. The truth was simple. The trail never ends. It only waits for the next one. The door creaked open. Cold air flooded the room, but there was nothing on the porch. Nothing visible. Just the empty road. The still trees. The perfectly normal world. Except it wasn't. Samuel's eyes dropped downward, and there they were. Footprints. Small. Bare. Leading away from his door. Down the steps. Across the lawn. Toward the forest. The same forest. The same path. The same trail. Deep. Fresh. As if someone, or something, had been waiting just long enough for him to open the door. Long enough to start walking again. A sound rose behind him. Soft at first. Then louder. Rhythmic. Hollow. The sound of footsteps. From inside the house. From behind him. He spun, heart slamming against his ribs. But there was no one there. Just the hallway. Empty. And yet, the footsteps continued. Not coming toward him, but walking away. Deeper into the house. Deeper into somewhere that shouldn't exist within the walls. Then came the bells. Soft. Distant. But not from the forest. Not from the church. Not from the mountain. From beneath. Beneath his feet. Beneath the foundation. Beneath everything. The same bells. The same hum. The same pulse. Always waiting. Always watching. And as Samuel stood frozen, caught between the empty footprints outside and the impossible footsteps inside, a whisper slid through the air. Gentle. Patient. Certain. One walks. One watches. One waits. One replaces. One remains. And the trail reopened. Some stories don't end. Some are never meant to. They linger, not in the places where they happened, but in the spaces we don't look. In the quiet moments between footsteps, between closed doors and unanswered knocks. The story of Sister Mary Agnes, of the trail, and of those who walked before isn't a mystery. It's a reflection, a glimpse into a truth most of us spend our entire lives pretending doesn't exist. Because the most terrifying thing isn't that the trail took her, or that it waits for someone else. The most terrifying thing is realizing the trail has always been there. Beneath our towns. Beneath our homes. Beneath us. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It doesn't care if you know the rules. It only cares about one thing, that someone always walks. And someone always waits. And maybe that's the question that should haunt all of us. How many knocks have you ignored? How many times has something, just out of you, called you forward, waiting to see if you'd answer? And if the trail really does run beneath everything, how can any of us be sure that we're not already on it? If this story left you with that feeling, that hollow tension deep in your chest, the kind that stays long after the screen goes dark, you're not alone. These stories aren't just about fear. They're about seeing the patterns, understanding the whispers, and maybe realizing that the most dangerous paths are the ones we never knew we were walking. So if you felt something, if this story left a mark, stay close. subscribe to the channel, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Because some stories are meant to be told, and others are meant to be remembered. Either way, the trail waits. And now, part of it lives with you.